Spartacus, Flame Over Vesuvius, an epic narrative of the life and death of the great gladiator. Be sure to watch this video to the end, and if you like it, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Book 1. Roots. Prologue. The one who survived the fire, an autumn wind swept over the slopes of Vesuvius, tearing the last leaves from the wild vines. Below, in the haze of the morning mist, lay Campania, the blessed land of the Roman patricians, where villas gleamed white on the hills, and roads paved with heavy stone shot toward the horizon like straight arrows piercing the flesh of Italy. A man stood on the slope. The wind tousled his long hair, tied back with a leather strap, and chilled his broad chest, covered with old scars, so many that his skin resembled a map of an unknown land, a land where each mark was a river, each mountain ridge a scar, and each forest a bruise, long since faded to yellow and healed. His eyes, dark, deep, as if burned out by an inner fire that burned there constantly, never dying down day or night, gazed into the distance, toward where Rome lay hidden beyond the hills. He did not know his future. None of those who waited for his command below, in the camp, knew that their names would be erased from memory, while his, Spartacus, would remain forever. Remain as a curse and as a hope, as a flame that once blazed over Vesuvius and lit up all Italy, making the eternal city tremble on its 7 hills. Down in the valley, some patrician's villa was still burning. The fire licked the night sky, and Spartacus watched it, thinking of another fire, the fire that had burned inside him since childhood. That fire had grown slowly, but now it blazed so brightly that it seemed it could burn down the whole world. Chapter 1. The land where stones remember blood, there, where the mountain rivers of Thrace thunderously carry their cold waters between cliffs, where forests rise toward the clouds and the wind smells of snow and freedom, there his life began. It happened around 103 years before the birth of Christ, though back then no one counted the years as we would count them. Time was measured differently, by harvests, by wars, by the birth of children and the death of elders. In the tribe of the Mede, who roamed the valley of the Strymon River, a boy was born inside a tent of felt and hides. The labor was difficult. His mother screamed for 3 days, and the shaman was already preparing to offer sacrifices to the spirits of the ancestors, so that they might receive the infant's soul should he not. Horses in the herd shied away, and dogs howled in all the neighboring encampments. They named him Spartacus, renowned with the spear. That was what they called warriors, and that was what they called kings. Perhaps the elders already saw something special in his eyes, that fire which does not go out until death itself. Or perhaps they simply sensed that this boy had not come into the world to tend sheep. His childhood was spent in the saddle. The Thracians knew no cradles. Infants were tied to horses so that from an early age they might grow accustomed to movement, to the wind, to danger. Spartacus learned to sit on a horse before he could walk. By the age of 4, he already held a child's bow and shot at gophers. By 6, he saw blood for the first time, helping his father butcher a deer. His father was the chieftain of a small clan, a grey-haired warrior whose face was cut with wrinkles like old bark. He had lost an eye in battle with the Romans before Spartacus was born, and since then he wore a black bandage that made him look like an ancient prophet. He taught his son what mattered most. A man must know how to die. Any fool knows how to live, but to die with dignity, that is something one must learn all one's life. Look, his father said, pointing toward the setting sun. It dies every evening only to be reborn in the morning. So it is with a warrior. He dies in battle to live on in the memory of his descendants. If there is no one left to remember you, then you never truly lived at all. His mother was different. She smelled of milk and herbs. She knew which roots healed wounds, which berries brought down fever, which incantations warded off evil spirits. She sang songs about the ancient heroes, about Orpheus who descended into the underworld, about King Rhesus whose horses were swifter than the wind, about warriors who never bowed their heads before their enemies. Spartacus loved to listen to those songs. He would close his eyes and see the heroes, mighty, beautiful, fearless. He dreamed of becoming like them. And enemies were everywhere. Neighboring tribes feuded with one another, drove off cattle, stole women, burned settlements. But the main enemy was advancing from the south, slowly, inexorably, like a forest fire. Rome was drawing close to Thracian lands, like a hunter stalking a beast, cautiously, yet unavoidably. When Spartacus was 10, the Romans came to their valley for the first time. They did not wage war. They simply marched through the lands of the Mede, displaying their might. Thousands of legionaries in gleaming armor, with heavy shields and short swords, advanced in orderly rows, and the earth trembled under their steps. Spartacus watched them from hiding and counted. He lost count after 1,000. "It is nothing," his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They are strong because there are many of them. But each one, taken alone, is just a man, of flesh and blood. And the sword enters them as easily as it does any other." At 13, Spartacus killed a man for the first time. It was a scout from a neighboring tribe that was feuding with the Mede. The boy lay in ambush, as his father had taught him, and when the enemy came close enough, he threw his spear. The spear went straight through the throat. The game he had hunted earlier had taught him to strike without missing. The scout fell, gurgling blood, and Spartacus watched him, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Not joy, not fear, not pity, just emptiness. His father walked over, looked at the dead man, then at his son. He nodded. "You are ready," he said. A month later, his father died. The Romans had returned, this time not as passers-by, but as conquerors. They burned encampments, drove off cattle, killed the men, led away women and children into slavery. Spartacus saw his father fighting in the front ranks, saw his sword flashing in the sun, saw him fall, pierced by 3 spears at once. Spartacus rushed to him, but it was too late. His father gazed at the sky with dimming eyes and moved his lips. Spartacus bent down to hear the final words. "Remember," his father rasped. "Better to die standing." He did not finish. But Spartacus knew what he had meant to say. Better to die standing than to live on one's knees. He remembered that forever. His mother died a year later. Of grief, the elders said. She simply lay down one day and did not rise again. Spartacus sat beside her bed, held her hand, watched life fade from her beloved eyes. And when they turned glassy, he understood. Now he was truly alone. At 14 years old, he was an orphan in a world where the sword ruled. Chapter 2. Another's glory, hunger drove him. The tribe had scattered, the survivors fleeing in all directions. Spartacus wandered through the mountains, living on roots and game, spending nights in caves, warming himself by the fires of chance fellow travelers. He thought of revenge, but understood, alone. He would accomplish nothing. Rome was too great. At 18, he became a mercenary. Many Thracians did the same. Their courage was highly valued, but their lives came cheap. Rome eagerly enlisted wild tribes to die for the interests of a foreign empire. The recruiter, an old centurion with gold stitching on his sleeve, scrutinized Spartacus with a piercing gaze. "You know how to fight?" "Yes, show me." Spartacus took a wooden sword and, within minutes, brought down 3 seasoned fighters who were meant to test him. The recruiter let out a low whistle. "You'll do. You'll receive pay, rations, and the right to plunder the vanquished. Live while the living's good. Spartacus donned a Roman helmet. He stood shoulder to shoulder with legionaries, listened to their coarse jokes, learned their iron discipline. The Roman army was a perfect killing machine. He understood that at once. Every legionary knew his place in the formation. Every maneuver was drilled to automaticity. Every order was executed instantly. Spartacus studied every detail of this mechanism, like a watchmaker studying a timepiece. He learned how the legionaries built a camp for the night, with a ditch, rampart, palisade, how they set guards, how they changed the watch. He knew how they attacked, first pila, then swords, how they retreated, reforming on the move. He saw their strength, discipline, and their weakness, arrogance. He learned, though he did not yet understand why he needed this knowledge. He simply felt it would prove useful. He took part in campaigns, witnessed death 100 times. Sometimes the slain appeared in his dreams, the faces of enemies he had sent to the underworld. But he learned not to dwell on it. A mercenary has no right to pity, neither for others nor for himself. Yet Roman service burned his soul. He could not forget his father, killed by a Roman sword. He could not accept that his people languished in poverty while the Romans bathed in luxury. Every time he received his pay, he felt like a traitor. Every time he put on the Roman uniform, he spat on his father's grave. One night, he removed his Roman cloak, cast aside his shield, and disappeared into the mountains. Deserter, fugitive. In the Roman Empire, this meant a death sentence that any passerby could carry out. He joined a band of outlaws preying on the highways. They robbed merchants, attacked small patrols, hid in forests and caves. Spartacus quickly rose to become their leader, not because he sought power, but because he knew how to think, not merely how to wield a sword. He devised ambushes, chose sites for attacks, taught the outlaws military stratagems he had observed from the Romans. He lived like that for 2 years, in the saddle, sword in hand, breathing the scent of freedom. 2 years that were the happiest of his life since his parents' death. But the Romans did not forgive offenses. They tracked down the band, surrounded them in a gorge, and killed all who resisted. Spartacus was taken alive. He took a blow to the head and awoke with his hands already bound. "This one is worth a good price," said the centurion, eyeing him like a horse at a fair. "Healthy, young, skilled. We'll sell him as a gladiator, get good money." Spartacus said nothing. He looked at the Romans and memorized their faces, every one of them, so that someday, if he survived, he would remember. Chapter 3. Iron and sand. Slavery is death in life. It is when you exist, but are not there. When your body belongs to another, and your soul slowly suffocates without air, like a fish cast ashore. Spartacus was sold 3 times. His first master was the owner of mines in Spain, a gaunt man with a sallow face who viewed slaves as expendable resources. Spartacus worked in the quarries, where the sun scorched the skin and stones stripped flesh from bone. He hauled boulders, choking on dust, and thought of his father. It was better to die standing than to live on one's knees. But he did not die. He waited. His second master was a wealthy landowner from Etruria. He bought Spartacus to work in the fields, plowing, sowing, harvesting. It was easier there than in the mines, but the humiliations were greater. The master enjoyed punishing his slaves personally. He would walk among them with a whip and flog them for the slightest infraction. Spartacus endured. He gritted his teeth and endured. He waited. His third master was a merchant who resold slaves in the markets of Italy. He transported Spartacus from city to city, putting him on display, forcing him to strip naked so buyers could appraise his muscles and teeth as they would a horse's. Spartacus stood on the platform, gazing over the heads of the crowd, and thought that one day all these faces, all these mocking gazes, all these pointing fingers, they would be begging for mercy. Finally, he was bought by Lentulus Gladiator, the owner of a gladiatorial school in Capua. Gladiator was a man who knew how to spot merchandise. He was a heavy-set man with a face pitted by smallpox and small, shrewd eyes that appraised sharply, like a money changer testing a coin on his teeth. He understood at once that this Thracian with burning eyes was worth more than any other slave. He could be sold at a high price in the arena if he survived. And if he died, well, that was fate. "You'll be a gladiator," Gladiator said when Spartacus was brought to the school. "I'll feed you well, train you well, heal you well. But in the arena, you must kill. If you kill well, perhaps one day you'll earn your freedom. If you do poorly, you'll die quickly." "It's simple." Spartacus said nothing. He looked at Gladiator and saw not a man, but a function, a part of the machine that ground human destinies into dust. He remembered. Gladiator's school was a hell hidden behind high walls. Hundreds of men lived in cramped cells. They were fed generously but meagerly, trained until they were drenched in sweat, healed when they fell sick, but only so they might kill one another for the amusement of a lazy crowd. The first days were the hardest. As a newcomer, the veterans tried to provoke Spartacus, testing his mettle. One evening in the communal cell, 3 Gauls approached him. They were huge, tattooed, with wild eyes. "Hey, Thracian," said the leader, whose name was Crixus. "The spot by the wall is taken. It's ours. Understand?" Spartacus rose slowly. He was half a head shorter than Crixus and leaner, but in his eyes burned such a cold fire that the Gauls instinctively stepped back. "The spot," Spartacus said quietly, "is where I stand. If you want to test it, come ahead." Crixus was about to lunge, but one of his companions, an older German named Enamors, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Wait," he said. "This one isn't joking. I've seen his kind. Better to be friends than to fight." Crixus snorted, but he backed down. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Enamors sat down beside Spartacus. "You're no ordinary slave," he said. "I can tell. Are you a noble? A warrior?" "I was a warrior," Spartacus replied. "Now I am nothing. Nothing lasts forever," Enamors said with a grin. "Here, in this school, everyone is waiting for something. Some wait for death, some for freedom. What do you wait for?" Enamors straight in the eye. "I wait for the moment." From that evening, their friendship began. Enamors became the first man Spartacus trusted. Crixus came around as well, first cautiously, then with the open-heartedness only Gauls possess. Hot-tempered, loud, always spoiling for a fight, Crixus was the complete opposite of the calm, calculating Spartacus. But they complemented each other, like fire and water. Plutarch, the Greek historian who lived a century after these events, would write of Spartacus, "This man was not only distinguished by exceptional courage and physical strength, but in intelligence and gentleness of character he rose above his station, and indeed seemed more like a Greek than a barbarian." The gladiators listened to him. They saw in him not just a fellow sufferer, they saw a leader. Chapter 4. Kitchen Knives. For 2 years, Spartacus trained in the ludus of Gladiator. For 2 years, he stepped into the arena and killed. Sometimes other gladiators, sometimes condemned criminals, sometimes captive barbarians who were fed to the public for entertainment. He had learned not to think about it. Killing had become work, a craft, like forging iron or ploughing a field. He would step onto the sand, hear the roar of the crowd, see faces distorted by bloodlust, and do his job. Coldly, calculatingly, ruthlessly. The crowd loved him. The Thracian with the cold eyes who kills beautifully. That was what they said about him in Capua. Gladiator grew rich off him. Spartacus brought in good money, and his master protected him like the apple of his eye. The best weapons, the best food, the best care after fights. But Spartacus knew the price of this concern. If he lost just one fight, his body would be tossed into a common pit like carrion. In 73 BC, a conspiracy took shape in the school of Gladiator. It began with whispers in the dark. Spartacus, Crixus, Enamors, and several other gladiators would gather at night in the far corner of the barracks, where the stone muffled their voices. They discussed plans, argued, fought, and made up. Crixus was the main instigator. "I don't want to wait anymore," he fumed. "Every day I wake up thinking, what if today I'm killed in the arena? And those bastards will stuff themselves with grapes and scream with delight. I want to cut them down." Now, Spartacus cooled his temper. "Patience," he said. "First, freedom. Then, revenge. If we break out now, with our bare hands, they'll cut us down in an hour. We need to prepare. We need weapons. Where will we get weapons?" Enamors asked grimly. "In the kitchen," Spartacus replied. "Knives, spits, axes. That will be enough to take down the guards. After that, we'll make it to the army." They spent weeks developing the plan. They learned when the guard changed, where the guard slept, which side the gates were on. They waited for the right moment, but time was running out. Someone informed. Gladiator found out about the conspiracy, perhaps from a bribed slave, perhaps from someone who accidentally overheard a conversation. He didn't raise an alarm. He simply decided to execute the ringleaders at the next games, to make an example of them. Rumors of this seeped into the barracks. Someone overheard Gladiator speaking with his manager, that Thracian and his cronies, for the next games. Purification sacrifices. The public loves it when gladiators are slaughtered in honor of the gods. Spartacus understood. They couldn't wait any longer. That evening, they gathered in the kitchen, supposedly to clean. 74 men. The most loyal. The most desperate. In the kitchen, there were knives, spits, axes for chopping meat. It was pitiful weaponry, but there was no other to be had. "Tonight," Spartacus said, looking each man in the eye. "Tonight or never. Either we die free men, or we are killed tomorrow in the arena. Choose." There was only one choice. The kitchen door burst open, and they surged out like beasts from a cage. The guards hadn't expected an attack. Who would have thought that slaves with kitchen knives would charge armed men? But they charged. The first guard didn't even have time to cry out. Spartacus drove a knife under his ribs, sharp and savage, aiming for the heart. The second tried to draw his sword, but Crixus, huge and roaring like a bull, knocked him to the ground and finished him with a spit. The third ran. An axe flew after him, landing squarely between his shoulder blades. Within minutes, the courtyard was drenched in blood. None of Gladiator's guards survived. The slaves rammed the gates with a wooden beam, and within a moment, they were free. 74 men, dressed only in tunics, with knives and spits in their hands, stood on the road leading out of Capua. Behind them lay the darkness of the barracks. Ahead was the night, the mountains, and the unknown. Spartacus looked back at the city. There, behind the walls, the Romans slept. There, in the wealthy homes, the patricians feasted. There, in the circus, tomorrow his blood was meant to be spilled. Chapter 5. The miracle on Vesuvius. They ran all night. The city guards gave chase but quickly fell behind. The gladiators ran at a speed only trained athletes could achieve. By dawn, they were in the foothills, and by noon, they were climbing the slopes of Vesuvius. Spartacus knew, in the mountains, they could hold out. The mountains were his home, his element. There, in Thrace, he had learned to survive where any Roman would die within a day. He knew where to find water, which roots were edible, how to build a fire without smoke so as not to give himself away. Others joined them. Slaves from nearby villas heard of the escape and fled to the mountains. Shepherds abandoned their flocks and headed for Vesuvius. Peasants ruined by taxes also began drifting in. For them, any enemy of Rome was a friend. Within a few days, Spartacus no longer had a handful of fugitives but a small band of several hundred men. They were incredibly lucky. On the way, they intercepted several wagons carrying weapons for gladiators to Capua. The drivers tried to resist, but they were quickly quieted. Spartacus opened the first crate and saw swords, real Roman ones, short and deadly. Beside them lay helmets, shields, greaves. The gods, it seemed, were on their side. Roman greed and carelessness had gifted them a real arsenal. The Romans reacted quickly. A detachment arrived from Rome under the command of Praetor Clodius Glaber. Glaber was an experienced soldier, a veteran of the German wars, but he viewed the slave uprising as a mere nuisance. What were a few dozen gladiators? Just block their descent from the mountain, and within a week, they would surrender from hunger. Glaber set up camp at the only path leading to the summit of Vesuvius. He ordered his men to rest. The siege promised to be long and boring. The soldiers played dice, drank wine, listened to old veterans' tales. No one expected danger. Meanwhile, at the summit, Spartacus gazed at the Roman campfires and thought. He saw that a frontal assault was impossible. The Romans outnumbered them 3-1, were better armed, knew how to form a testudo, tortoise, and repel attacks. But fighting the Romans head-on was a fool's errand. He needed to outsmart them. He sat by the fire, staring into the flames, when suddenly his eyes fell on a grapevine winding up a rock face. Flexible and strong, it twisted upward, clinging to the stones. "Vines," he said aloud. "Grapevines." Crixus, dozing nearby, jerked awake. "What? What vines? What are you talking about?" Spartacus was no longer listening. He jumped up and ran to the edge of the cliff from which the Roman camp was visible. Yes, this was the way out. The only way. "Cut the vines," he ordered. "All you can find. Braid them into ropes. Quickly." The men didn't understand why, but they obeyed. They cut the vines with knives, tied them into knots, making long ropes. By morning, they had several hundred meters of the strongest cords, woven from grapevine tendrils. That night, when the moon hid behind the clouds, they began their descent. Where Glaber had considered ascent impossible, Spartacus found a path. The men clung to vines, rocks, roots, passing weapons and supplies from hand to hand. They descended into the darkness like shadows, like ghosts, like souls of the dead returning to the world of the living. One man fell. Spartacus heard his cry, cut short somewhere below, but could do nothing to help. The others pressed on. 3 hours later, they were at the bottom. They rounded the cliff and emerged directly behind the Roman camp. The Romans were asleep. Some snored in their tents, others were finishing their evening carouse, sentries dozed by the fires. Torches burned throughout the camp, and Spartacus could see the guard's shadows moving slowly along the palisade. He gave the signal. 74 gladiators moved silently forward. The attack came from where it was least expected. Spartacus struck from the rear, from the summit Glabba had deemed impregnable. Panic in the Roman camp was total. In the darkness, no one knew how many enemies there were, where they had come from, or where to run. Legionaries burst out of their tents only to fall immediately under sword blows. Centurions tried to form ranks, but their voices drowned in the screams of terror. Glabba ran out of his tent in just his tunic, sword in hand. He managed to kill 2 men before Crixus knocked him to the ground and put a knife to his throat. "Don't kill him," said Spartacus, approaching. "Let him live. Let him tell Rome how slaves beat Romans." By morning, Glabba's camp had ceased to exist. Nearly 2,000 Romans were killed or wounded. The rest fled, abandoning their weapons and standards. The weapons, armor, supplies, all went to the rebels. Spartacus stood on the rampart of the destroyed camp, watching the dying flames of the tents. Beside him stood Crixus and Enamors, breathing heavily after the battle. "Well, Thracian," Crixus grinned, wiping his blooded sword on the grass. "Now will we march on Rome?" Spartacus shook his head. "Too soon. Now there will be many of us. But first, we must teach them how to fight. Otherwise, we won't defeat the next Glabba." News of this victory spread across Italy like wildfire. Slaves rose up in the estates. Peasants abandoned their fields and headed for Vesuvius. Spartacus's army grew like a snowball rolling down mountain. Chapter 6. From chaos, order when thousands of people arrive at a camp, speaking different languages, knowing no discipline, thirsting for revenge and plunder. That is not an army. That is a mob. And a mob dies quickly. Spartacus understood this better than anyone. Every morning he walked through the camp and watched what was happening. The Gauls, loud and unruly, constantly quarreled with the Germans, who were sullen and vindictive. The Thracians did not trust the Syrians, and the Greeks looked down on everyone, considering themselves descendants of a great civilization. The women wept, the children were sick, the elderly were dying of their wounds. If order was not established, they would cut each other's throats before ever facing the Romans. Spartacus started with the most important thing. He gathered all the leaders of the tribes and groups. "Listen to me," he said. "Here, on this mountain, we are all equal. It doesn't matter who you are, a Gaul, a Greek, or a Thracian. Here, you are a free person, and freedom must be defended. For that, we need order." He laid down the laws. First, the division of plunder equally. No one was allowed to take more than another. Gold, silver, food, weapons, everything was shared among all, without deceit. Second, a ban on looting and violence without orders. Those who tried to rape prisoners or rob local peasants were executed without hesitation. Spartacus personally beheaded 3 Gauls who had raped the daughter of a local shepherd. Later, that shepherd brought 10 of his sons to the camp. All of them joined the army. Third, everyone must learn to fight the Roman way. Spartacus formed training units where former gladiators taught newcomers how to handle a sword, form a testudo, tortoise, and throw a pilum. The women learned to use bows and slings, in case they had to defend the camp. "We are not a gang of bandits," Spartacus repeated. "We are an army. An army has a goal. We must lead our people beyond the Alps to freedom." Crixus grumbled. To him, a hot-blooded Gaul, such discipline seemed boring. He wanted fun, wanted blood, wanted to march on Rome immediately and burn it to the ground. "Why do we need these Alps?" he argued. "We are here, in Italy. Here there are rich lands. Here there is wine and women. Here we can live the good life. Here we will be killed, Spartacus explained patiently. Rome will not forgive us for this. Sooner or later, they will gather a huge army and crush us. We have no cities, no walls, no supplies. We must leave while we can, and if we win. Crixus pressed on. If we gather all the slaves of Italy and march on Rome. Spartacus looked at his friend with sadness. Even if we gather all the slaves, he said quietly, the Romans will still outnumber us. They have an army, we have a mob. They have discipline, we have chaos. We might win a battle, even two, but we will not win the war. Not here. But not everyone wanted to leave. The Italian slaves, born in this land, could not imagine life outside it. They wanted revenge, wanted to feast in the villas of their former masters, wanted to feel like lords. For them, freedom was where they were born, not beyond the mountains. The tension grew. Chapter 7. Spartacus's army, now numbering over 70,000 men, moved north. They marched along the Apennines, leaving behind burned estates and freed slaves. Rome, in a panic, was gathering its forces. The two consuls, Gellius and Lentulus, led two armies, each of 20,000 legionaries, to intercept them. Then Crixus announced he was leaving. It happened at a war council, in Spartacus's tent. Crixus stood up, put his hands on his hips, and said loudly so that everyone could hear, "I'm leaving, Spartacus. My Gauls stay with me. We want to fight, not run like rabbits." The tent fell silent. Enamors went pale. The other chieftains exchanged glances. Spartacus slowly rose from behind the table. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he asked quietly. "The Romans will crush you. Separately, they'll crush both of us. Together, they'd crush us even faster." Crixus shouted, "You're dragging us north, but I want to go south. I want to plunder. I want revenge. My men want the same." Spartacus walked right up to him. They stood face to face, the Thracian and the Gaul, two friends, two brothers in arms, two leaders. "Crixus," Spartacus said, and for the first time, a plea entered his voice. "Don't do this. We started together. We broke out of Gladiator's school together. We beat Gladiator together. Don't break our alliance. You're the one breaking the alliance." Crixus stepped back. "You want to go beyond the Alps and abandon Italy. But I was born here." "Well, not here," he corrected himself. "In Gaul, but I've been here for 20 years. Italy is my home." "A home of slaves." Spartacus smiled bitterly. Better to be a slave in Italy than free in the cold. Crixus retorted, "Farewell, Thracian. If you survive, we'll meet again." He left the tent. His men followed, Gauls, some Germans, several bands of Italian slaves. 30,000 men left with Crixus. Spartacus watched them go. Enamors came up and stood beside him. "We have to bring them back," the German said, "if the Romans strike." "No bringing them back," Spartacus interrupted. "Crixus is as stubborn as 100 donkeys. Let's hope he holds out while we deal with Lentulus." They never saw each other again. The Romans didn't wait. Consul Gellius threw all his forces at Crixus. 30,000 Gauls and Germans met the legions near Mount Gargan in Apulia. Crixus fought like a madman. He raged across the battlefield, cutting left and right, his red menere flying in the wind, and the Romans shrank from him as from an enraged lion. But the legions closed in, surrounded them, crushed them with numbers. A spear struck Crixus in the side as he was breaking through toward the centurion who had killed his standard-bearer. He fell to one knee but kept fighting until a second spear went through his throat. He died with his sword in his hand, looking at the sun. The Romans searched for his body among the heap of corpses for a long time but never found it. He lay buried under his fallen comrades. 30,000 rebels died that day. The Romans took no prisoners. They cut down everyone, even women, even children. Blood flowed down the slopes of Mount Gargan, and the earth drank it, unable to get enough. Spartacus found out a week later. A messenger, who had miraculously survived the slaughter, crawled into camp and collapsed at Spartacus's feet. "All," he gasped. "Crixus is dead. Everyone is dead." Spartacus stood motionless. His face had turned to stone. Only the muscles in his jaw worked beneath the skin. Enamors watched him and was afraid to approach. That night, Spartacus went into the forest and stayed there until morning. No one knows what he thought about. Perhaps he remembered how Crixus had first come up to him in the school, brash and overconfident. How they had fought together in the arena, covering each other's backs. How they had drunk wine after victories, laughing like boys. How they had argued and made up. In the morning, he returned to camp. His eyes were dry, but such a fire burned in them that people looked away. "We will avenge him," he said shortly. Prepare for battle. A few days later, he managed to capture 400 Roman prisoners. Spartacus ordered gladiatorial games to be held in honor of his fallen friend. "Let the Romans see what it's like to be slaves in the arena," he said. The 400 Romans were forced to fight to the death. Those who refused were butchered on the spot. A crowd of slaves, women, and children watched and rejoiced. But Spartacus stood apart, his face unreadable. It was a terrible revenge. But he knew, in this war, there was no room for mercy. Chapter 8. The North Wind. He shattered the consular armies one by one, like an experienced player beating novices at dice. First, he struck at Lentulus, who had strayed too far from the main force. Lentulus's legions were camped in a valley, believing themselves safe. Spartacus attacked at dawn, just as the soldiers were waking up. Thousands of slaves descended on the camp from all sides, and within an hour, it was over. Lentulus fled, abandoning his standards and his wounded. Then Spartacus turned and marched against Gellius, who was already celebrating his victory over Crixus. Gellius did not expect a blow. He thought the main rebel force had been destroyed. Spartacus proved him wrong. The second battle was harder. The Romans had time to prepare, but the slaves' numerical advantage and their fury carried the day. Gellius retreated, leaving half his army dead on the field. The road north lay open. 100,000 people, men, women, children, the elderly, wagons loaded with goods, cattle, horses, moved along the Adriatic coast. They marched fast, hardly stopping. Spartacus drove them forward, knowing they had no time. Every day of delay brought a new Roman army closer. In Cisalpine Gaul, near the town of Mutina, they were met by the proconsul Gaius Cassius with a force of 10,000 men. Cassius was a relative of the same Cassius who would later gain fame as one of Caesar's assassins, and like his descendant, he was foolishly overconfident. "A mob of slaves," he told his officers scornfully. "I'll scatter them with a single charge." He drew up his legions in battle order and advanced toward the rebels. Spartacus watched the Roman ranks approach and waited. When the enemy was 100 paces away, he raised his sword. "Forward," he shouted. "For freedom." The battle was short and brutal. The former gladiators, hardened by combat, broke through the center of the Roman line. The Gauls and Germans, fearless in their fury, struck the flanks. The cavalry, gathered from shepherds and deserters, swept around the rear of the Romans. Cassius' legionaries wavered. They saw that the slaves were not scattering but forming up like a real army. They saw Spartacus personally leading the attack, fighting in the front ranks. They ran. Cassius ran with them, abandoning his standards, his weapons, his wounded. He fled on horseback without looking back, and the wind of shame whistled in his ears. The road to the Alps lay open. The mountains already loomed blue on the horizon, covered in snow, impassable and beautiful. The wind from the north carried the scent of freedom. Chapter 9. The mystery of the southern turn, and then came what historians would puzzle over for centuries. Spartacus did not cross the Alps. He turned his army back toward the south. Why? There are many answers, but only he knew the truth. Perhaps his men, drunk on victory, had mutinied and refused to leave. Perhaps he himself decided that Gaul would not welcome them with open arms either. The Gauls, though they hated the Romans, treated slaves no better. Perhaps he wanted to finish off Rome first, then leave in triumph. But more likely, Spartacus simply could not leave Italy. Too much blood had been spilled here. Too many brothers lay in this soil. And somewhere down in the south, Sicily was waiting, the island where slaves had risen up not long ago, where there were rich estates and thousands of captives longing for freedom. Sicily could become a base, a true kingdom of liberty, from which Rome could be threatened for years. Be that as it may, the army turned and marched south. Panic broke out in Rome. Senators clutched their heads, the rich packed their valuables, women wept. People said Spartacus was already at the walls, that he would burn the city, that all Romans would be slaughtered. Rumors spread that tens of thousands of new slaves had joined the rebels, that Spartacus's army was now larger than any Roman one, that even Hannibal had not been so terrifying. But Spartacus did not march on Rome. He bypassed it, moving into the richest part of Italy, Campania, where new slaves, new supplies, and a new goal awaited him. Rome breathed a sigh of relief and began preparing its counterstrike. Book 3, Destruction, Chapter 10. The Iron Crassus. The Senate chose Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome. His fortune was estimated in the hundreds of millions of sesterces. He owned houses, lands, mines, and ships. But wealth did not make him soft. On the contrary, he was ruthless, calculating, and ambitious to the marrow of his bones. He dreamed of military glory, of a triumph, of power. And the revolt of Spartacus gave him his chance. He was given 6 new legions, added to them the remnants of the old ones, and under his command there were about 50,000 elite soldiers. But Crassus knew this was not enough. He began recruiting volunteers, promising rich rewards. Veterans came to him, adventurers, even gladiators hoping for pardon. Crassus was not like the previous commanders. He did not rush into battle, did not lose his temper, did not try to win glory with a single blow. He was patient as a constrictor and cruel as fate itself. He started small, cutting off roads, destroying foraging parties, starving the enemy army. He did not want a decisive battle. He wanted to wear down the enemy, to strangle him, like strangling a snake by tightening the coils. The 2 legions that had faltered in their first clash with Spartacus's forces, Crassus punished in a show of force. He drew up the entire army and ordered every 10th man executed. Decimation, he announced, an ancient custom that we have forgotten. But I remind you, cowardice is punished by death. 500 legionaries were clubbed to death before the eyes of their comrades. Crassus's army understood. This man was not joking. Better to die in battle than to be beaten like a dog. Spartacus felt it. Crassus was no Glabber, no Lentulus. This was an opponent worthy of him. He tried to break away from Crassus, maneuvered, slipped away, but Crassus was a shadow from which you could not tear yourself free. Chapter 11. The Strait of Blue. In the autumn of 71 BCE, Spartacus led his army to the Strait of Messina. There, beyond a narrow strip of water, lay Sicily, an island where the memory of slave revolts had not yet faded, an island of rich estates, where thousands of enslaved people waited only for a signal. If they could cross there, the war would drag on for years, and perhaps Rome might lose this land entirely. Spartacus stood on the shore and gazed at the blue water. Waves lapped onto the sand, gulls cried overhead. Across the strait, shrouded in haze, the outlines of Sicily could be made out, a promised land. "We need ships," said Enamors, approaching. "Without ships, we cannot cross, I know," Spartacus replied. He sent messengers to the Cilician pirates. The Cilicians were masters of the seas. They plundered merchant vessels, took ransom for captives, sold slaves. For money, they would do anything. The pirates arrived a week later. Their leader, a bearded Greek with an earring, haggled for a long time, but finally agreed. 200 ships in exchange for the gold and silver the slaves had plundered over 2 years of war. "In a month," said the pirate. "By then, we will gather every ship we have." "Wait." Spartacus waited. He set up camp on the shore, sent detachments for provisions, prepared for the crossing. His men grew cheerful, hope lay ahead. But a month passed, then a second. The pirates did not appear. Crassus had bribed them. Roman gold smelled more reliable than the promises of slaves. The pirates took the money and sailed away, leaving Spartacus on the shore with his army of 100,000. He stood on a rock and looked at the water. The blue strip of the strait separated him from salvation. Blue, like his mother's eyes, which he remembered dimly. Blue, like the sky above Thrace. "We will break through," he said to Enamors, who had come up beside him. "We have always broken through." Chapter 12. The wall. Crassus did not waste time on an assault. He ordered a wall to be built. Across the entire Bruttian Peninsula, from sea to sea, the Roman legions began to dig. 50,000 soldiers worked day and night, relieving one another. They dug a ditch 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep. Behind the ditch, they raised an embankment reinforced with stone and timber. On the embankment, they built towers every 100 paces so that archers could cover every inch of ground. 50 kilometers of fortifications from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Ionian Sea. In just a few weeks, the Romans completed a task that would normally take months. Spartacus's army was trapped. On 3 sides, the sea. On the 4th, Crassus's wall. Supplies dwindled, people starved, and disease broke out. The Gauls grumbled, the Germans demanded a breakout, the Syrians prayed to their gods. Spartacus said nothing. He walked along the camp, looking at his people, at the children already swelling with hunger, at the elderly dying day by day. He thought. One night, he summoned Enamors and several seasoned warriors. "Look," he said, pointing at the wall. "Crassus thinks we cannot break through." But he forgot one thing. "What?" asked Enamors. "That we are slaves, and slaves are used to working. We will fill his ditch with everything we have." The next night, as the wind howled in the mountains and snow covered their tracks, Spartacus roused the army. Thousands of men carried bundles of brushwood, planks, logs, animal carcasses, stones, anything that could fill the ditch. Women and children helped. The elderly dragged whatever they could. The Romans did not expect an attack on such a night. The sentries had taken shelter from the wind. The soldiers slept in their tents, wrapped in cloaks. By the time the ditch was filled, by the time the first bands of slaves had crossed it and stormed the embankment, it was already too late. Spartacus fought in the front ranks. His sword gleamed in the torchlight. Blood sprayed in all directions. Legionaries fell beneath his blows like grass beneath a scythe. Crassus fled. He dashed out of his tent in just his cloak, leaped onto a horse, and galloped into the darkness, abandoning his soldiers. The wall had fallen. Spartacus broke free from the trap. Chapter 13. The last council, they marched toward Brundisium, a large port on the eastern coast. Ships stood there, ready to carry them to Greece, to the Balkans, anywhere as long as it was far from Rome. But at Brundisium, Lucullus had already landed with his army from Macedonia. The same Lucullus who was famous for his lavish feasts and his victories over Mithridates. He had 20,000 veterans, hardened by wars in the east. From the west came Pompey the Great, leading fresh legions from Spain. Pompey had already made a name for himself defeating Sertorius. He was the darling of both the army and the people. The noose was tightening. For the last time, Spartacus called a war council. The chieftains gathered in the tent: Gauls, Germans, Thracians, Greeks. All were silent. All knew this was the end. "Tomorrow we will fight," said Spartacus. His voice was calm, as always. "We are fewer in number. We have no supplies. We are tired and wounded. But we are free. We have always been free. And tomorrow we will die free." Could we negotiate? Someone ventured timidly. Would they let us go? Spartacus smirked. "Have you seen the crosses along the roads? Have you seen how they execute our people? They will not let us go. They need our death. They need our blood to keep the rest of the slaves afraid. Very well, they will have it, but they will pay dearly for it." He stepped out of the tent. In the camp, fires blazed. People sat by the flames, bandaging wounds, cleaning weapons. Someone was singing a Gallic song about heroes who fell in battle. Someone else was praying to their gods. Children slept, pressed against their mothers. Spartacus walked to the hitching post where his horse stood, a magnificent white stallion captured in battle with the Romans. The horse nuzzled his shoulder and neighed softly. Spartacus drew his sword. "Forgive me, my friend," he said. Indeed, with one stroke, he cut the horse's throat. The stallion dropped to its knees, then rolled onto its side, gazing at its master with large, wet eyes. Warriors rushed to the noise. They stood in silence, watching. "If we win," said Spartacus, wiping his sword on the grass, "I will have plenty of good Roman horses. If we lose, I will have no need for my horse." He had left himself no path for retreat. Chapter 14. The river Salaris, morning broke blood red. The sun rose over the hills of Lucania, illuminating the plain by the river Salaris. The autumn grass had yellowed, and the wind drove ragged clouds across the sky. On one side stood Crassus's legions, 50,000 soldiers clad in armor. They had formed 3 lines, as the regulations prescribed. Banners fluttered between the maniples, and centurions shouted orders. On the other side stood Spartacus's army, 100,000 men, women, and children who knew this was their last battle. They did not form perfect lines. They simply stood shoulder to shoulder, as best they could. In the center were the most reliable, former gladiators, Thracians, Gauls who had marched with him the entire way. On the flanks was hastily assembled cavalry, made up of shepherds and deserters. In the rear were the women and children, praying to their gods and sharpening their knives in case the Romans broke through. Spartacus took off his helmet so everyone could see his face. He walked along the line, looking into each pair of eyes. He did not give speeches. Words were no longer needed. When he reached the center, he stopped and raised his sword. "Today," he said quietly, but everyone heard him. "Today, we will show them how free people die." The battle began. Crassus sent the first line into the attack. The legions advanced in steady step, hurling their pila. Thousands of javelins soared into the air, and thousands of slaves fell, pierced through. But the rest did not waver. They waited. When the Romans came within sword's reach, Spartacus swung his blade and lunged forward. Everyone rushed after him. They collided with such force that the very ground seemed to tremble. Shouts, the clang of metal, the crunch of bones, the stench of blood, all merged into a single hell. Spartacus fought in the front ranks like an ordinary warrior. His sword showed no mercy. He hacked, stabbed, and mowed down legionaries as a reaper cuts wheat. The Romans shrank back from him but kept surging forward. He fought his way toward Crassus. Through the gaps between shields, he could see the general's arrogant face, see him issuing orders, redeploying his troops. A little more, and he would reach him. But there were too many Romans. They surrounded him, pressing with numbers, with iron, with discipline. The slave ranks thinned. The Gauls fell one by one. The Germans fought to the last, but even they could not hold back the onslaught. Spartacus took his first wound to the shoulder. The sword slid across bone, and blood drenched his arm. He paid it no attention. The second wound, in his side. A legionary got him while he was distracted. Spartacus roared in pain and cleaved the enemy in two. Blood poured into his eyes, but he kept fighting. He could see nothing but enemies. They swarmed from everywhere, like locusts, like ants. He nearly reached Crassus. He even saw the fear in the general's eyes. Crassus was retreating, shielded by his bodyguards. A little more, and he would. Someone's sword slashed at his legs. Spartacus fell to one knee. He sprang up, parried a blow, fell again. The battle raged around him, but he could barely see anything now. Only the sky above, blue as the water in the Strait of Messina, blue as his mother's eyes. The last thing he saw was a Roman centurion raising his sword for a strike, and Crassus's face somewhere far away, on a hill, watching him. Then darkness. Epilogue. Crosses, Spartacus's body was never found. Hundreds of corpses lay on the field by the river Salaris. The Romans made no effort to distinguish the leader from a common slave. They threw them all into a common pit and covered them with lime to stop the stench. No one knows where the ashes of the great Thracian rest. Crassus ordered 6,000 prisoners crucified along the Appian Way, from Capua to Rome. 200 kilometers of crosses. 200 kilometers of slow, agonizing death. The crosses stood so close together that from one you could make out the face of the dying man on the next. They stood along Italy's main road, and every traveler heading to Rome saw what awaited those who dared challenge the eternal city. Birds pecked at the eyes of the living. Soldiers laughed as they rode past. Merchants turned away to avoid seeing the horror. Mothers covered their children's eyes, and the crucified hung there, tormented by wind and rain, screaming until their strength gave out. Some hung for 3 days. Crassus rode the entire length of the road, accepting honors. He looked at the crosses and smiled. His moment had come. He had won. But Pompey, who had arrived too late for the battle yet in time to finish off the remnants of the rebels who had fled the field, wrote to Rome, "Crassus defeated the slaves, but I tore out the very root of the war." And Rome awarded Pompey a triumph, while Crassus received only the lesser triumph, an ovation. Thus Rome divided glory while men died on crosses. And the name of Spartacus passed into legend. Slaves whispered it at night, passing it to their children as a sacred testament. Gladiators drank to it before battle. Rebels in other lands called themselves by his name. And somewhere in distant Thrace, in mountain villages, old men told their grandchildren of the great warrior born in those hills who died fighting for freedom, of one who challenged Rome itself and made the eternal city tremble, of one whose name became a symbol of eternal struggle. Centuries would pass. The empire would fall. Rome would turn to ruins. Latin would become a dead language. But the name Spartacus would be remembered. Karl Marx would call him his hero. Philosophers would write treatises about him. Directors would make films in which a handsome actor in gladiator armor would deliver handsome speeches. But the truth would remain there, on the field by the river Salaris, where a man lay in bloody mud, empty eyes gazing at the blue sky and seeing nothing but darkness. The darkness where there was no longer Rome, no chains, no freedom. Only peace. I stood on the slope of Vesuvius and watched the setting sun. Below, in the haze of evening mist, lay Campania. The same Campania he had seen 2,000 years ago. The wind tousled my hair. Somewhere below, at the mountain's foot, archaeologists were excavating the remains of a gladiatorial school. The very one he had escaped from. The very one where the legend began. I thought of him, of the man who defied an empire, of the warrior who chose death over slavery, of the leader who led 100,000 and never betrayed them. And I imagined the wind carried his voice. It is better to die standing than to live on your knees. Spartacus, glorified by the spear. Forever.